If you want to go on YouVersion, there's directions how to get there in the bulletin, or you can follow along in the bulletin and the Bible. I'd appreciate it. As I flip through the Bible, the most common description that God has for us is that of sheep. If you think about it, right? Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. That makes us, come on, let's get involved. Makes us sheep. All this laying down in green pasture stuff, right? I mean, that sounds like sheep. Bible says that God has compassion on us, like he looks down on us as we're wandering around like sheep, aimlessly, like we need a shepherd. Anybody's life feel like that right now? Stuff like that, right? All of this is because Jesus and the Holy Spirit want us, as we look at the Bible, to be able to see that he was trying to connect with his rural Jewish audience, with things they could relate to. But honestly, I have enough knowledge of sheep that I actually find it quite insulting. I mean, have you ever seen sheep run? Anybody ever visibly watched sheep run? See, now I'm an athlete. Some of you have been watching the NCAAs this week, and those athletes are impressive when they run. I quite honestly wish some people would get as excited about Jesus as they do their brackets or their particular sports team. But I love athletic things. Like if I'm flipping across the TV and some cheetah is running on the TV, I like just watching that. It's just impressive. Or like a really powerful horse. You know, a horse, they stride out with these big, beautiful strides, the mane flowing in the wind, right? It's impressive. So I don't like sheep because they have this little geeky, no knee bend thing. There's no stride. It's just geeky. Here's what it cries. It cries nerd. Little fuzzy nerds. I don't want to be a sheep. By the way, you'll never see a sheep as a mascot, right? You just won't see that. None of those teams in the NCAA tournament are named the sheep. There's no professional sports teams. The New York sheep. No. The LA sheep. The Rams are close. And you see what we've gotten out of that deal. Inept. We're God's kids, man. How come we couldn't be the lion? Right? I mean, this king of the beast, this impressive animal, strong, powerful, independent. Nobody tells the lion what to do, right? Oops. Just ran into a problem. I mean, I was a lion, mascot, Northwest High School, and we were smashing fox in the day, right? We were killing the locals here back in the day. We were lions. But if you look up in the Bible, who gets lion? Who gets that mascot? Jesus. Who else? Satan. He is, when Jesus is using metaphors, when God is using metaphors, he's like a roaring lion seeking who he may devour. Which, by the way, explains all kinds of things about my high school being in Time magazine in 1976. If you've never heard that. We get sheep. Satan gets the same metaphor as Jesus. Yeah, he gets lion. But we get sheep. Weak little nerds that would die if not fed. Completely dependent. Americans never want to be sheep. That's why we don't have any mascots. We don't want to be sheep, and that's a problem for us. Well, I want to spend a minute here, look through some traits about sheep that show they need some help, show they need a shepherd. First one is this, they're in your sermon notes so you can follow along. Sheep follow each other around. Debbie Thorson has all kinds of sheep. If you've ever been on her farm, she has fantastic stories about this. She says that she will have some sheep on her farm. They'll run in a little line, and the first sheep will jump over something that's not there. And every sheep behind will jump over something that's not there. They are followers. They will mimic the lead sheep. There's nothing there. She says once in a while she'll show up late in the evening after working and she has to go feed the sheep in the dark. Every time when she pulls up in her truck with the headlights on, the sheep see the headlights. There's one lead sheep that takes off running for the headlights and bangs into the bumper, knocks itself senseless. What happens? Every other sheep in the pack runs up and bangs his head into the bumper, knocking themselves senseless. They all follow suit. Like, donk. Can't you see it? Can't you see it? They just follow each other into the dumbest situations. We don't do that. Do we? Along those lines, number two, sheep do dumb things. I have a friend, Ken Davis, who worked on a farm with sheep in his youth, and I gotta like show you this. He was walking across the farm one day, and he stumbled upon the horse trough, and somehow a sheep had gotten in the horse trough upside down, with his little geeky no bend knees, just kind of like wallowing like this. He would have literally starved and died in the horse trough if Ken had not come along. Usually I'm surprised there weren't like multiple sheep in there. Like, that looks like a great idea. I'll follow this other dumb sheep in there. We don't do that, do we? Third thing is sheep are scared. I don't know if you've ever heard any of the stories like that. They're full of fear. Ken actually had a horse on his farm that would run out in the field and tip the sheep over. I guess he would see them like geek running across the field, couldn't see any leg movement and think they were like a fuzzy soccer ball or something, but the horse would just take off on a gallop and tip the sheep over. He never hurt them, but the sheep on that farm soon learned if they saw a horse, they just got scared and started running. Just packs of sheep would just take off sprinting anytime they saw a horse, full of fear. I've heard that sheep will actually die in a lightning storm. Not because they get hit by lightning, they just quake themselves to death. We're surely more like a lion than we are sheep, aren't we? We never live in fear, do we? And as we can see right there, sheep die easy. Not only the lightning or the horse using soccer ball, sheep just die easy. My friend Ken tells a story about that there was one sheep named Herman on his farm, and Herman was an older sheep. And have you ever noticed that sometimes animals just have this look on their face like, I'm mischievous? Maybe you've had a dog like that or something in the past that when you just look at this kind of old soul sheep, it just says, I am mischievous. And Herman was always mischievous. He was never where he was supposed to be. He was slow to follow. He was always like pulling on the edge of pranks. As a matter of fact, Ken one day was out working next to the fence watering sheep, and the fence line that they had some barbed wire on it, I think, but it also had one line of electricity running through the bottom. Now, it wasn't a big voltage, but remember, Ken was working with water, and so he was filling up a watering trough. Surprised there wasn't a sheep in there, but he's filling the watering trough, and Herman saw his hind end like a target. And little mischievous old Herman took a run and hit Ken in the hind end, which put one hand on the electricity and his other hand in the bucket. It wasn't enough to hurt him, but it was enough for him to become a little bit perturbed. And Ken decided he was going to get old Herman back. And so one day, young Ken was laying in wait and hiding, and he saw ugly little mischievous face Herman coming around the corner. And he jumped out at him and just said, whoa! And Herman just keeled over and died. Now, Ken's father was not very impressed. As a matter of fact, when Ken's father was an old man, some 30 or 40 years later, he pulled Ken into the living room one time and he said, "Ken, before I go, I got to know the truth. What did you hit Herman with?" He suspected his whole life that he said, "No, Dad, just boo." He said, "Sheep die easy." And some of you probably have some experience in this broken world that maybe we're a little bit more like sheep than we want to think. We don't do that, do we? So if we look at that stuff by simple logic, we are much like sheep in need of a shepherd. So let's see if we can find one. John chapter 10, our mascot, the sheep. "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep will follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers." This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. And so we love metaphors around here. And Jesus uses two of them in our study today. And he will explain better than me, but let's give this a run. First is the door. As I sometimes around here give you a mission metaphor, we say, point to the gate, right? We have done that before. We've drawn this picture on the board and said we're out on mission. We're in this field of very difficult life. And oftentimes we don't know exactly how people are going to perceive the gospel. And so rather than go into these deep, dark explanations of Scripture, let's simplify it. Just point to the gate. We say it over and over and over again. Point to the gate. And sometimes when I'm teaching that, I'll actually say, point to the door. And so we don't want to drag people into the gospel. We just keep pointing to the gate. Let's enter through the gate. Now, I want to point out the difference between like the NIV and the ESV for you. Sometimes people need some education as to the difference in translations. NIV uses the word gate. The reason for that is, and that's a good translation, and the reason it uses gate is people here in America in a phrase type translation appreciate the word gate because we can see that as something that sheep would use. The NIV uses door, the ESV uses door because it's a word by word translation, and door is the closest to the actual Greek word here. And the reason for that is that if you actually travel to Israel, most of the sheepfolds are either hooked to the house or they're a cave. And Kelly and I have actually seen a sheep gate that Abraham built. Now that's weird. It's that old. It's a sheepfold of Abraham, and it's a cave, and it actually looks more like a door. And so the Greek word is much more door than gate, but we can understand gate because our sheep here in America have gates. And so there you get a little difference of phrase of the NIV, word for word, same idea, the entry point. The entry point to someplace safe. So these rural Jews that Jesus was talking to would have understood that the sheepfold was a safe place. Get that. The sheepfold is where you want to be. We all are looking for safety. I saw you've probably heard me talk about this before, a survey one time of women's biggest desire in life. And number one by far in this survey was security. Women when they're looking for a spouse, a place to live, and for themselves and for their kids, a huge desire of theirs on that scale is security. And I get that. Safety, home, a sheepfold, you might say. But usually this was a cave or a place that they had built on the backside. There was like the field where sheep hung out during the day, and then there was a sheepfold where the shepherd would take the sheep at night when more predators were out and when danger came up. But also the sheepfold, I want you to think about this, was home. We have this innate thing inside of us that desires home. Anybody ever been on the greatest vacation of your life? Like you're on a beach somewhere and really relaxed and it's great and you're really enjoying and relax. And yet in the middle of all that relaxation and all that deal there's this desire to go home, wherever home is. If you're really smart, I guess you just put your home at the beach, right? But there's this desire. At some point, I just want to get home. And that is something that God has wired inside of us, because we all have a desire for the garden to be returned, and so we have a desire for home. But here, before all that happens, isn't that where we really want to be? Where there is a gatekeeper who, in this passage, I believe to be the Father, and there is a shepherd. Because at the end of the day, in this crazy, broken world, can we really protect ourselves? We can conceal and carry, we can do all kinds of gun safety, we can load our house with guns. And yet at the end of the day, can we protect ourselves? And we know from this passage that there are other factors that sneak inside the door. That lion, maybe. But even in the midst of another voice coming in, another problem coming in, it says that God's voice can be heard, and that his sheep recognize and can flee the voice of the stranger, maybe the lion. See, right there, God explains both metaphors. He is clear here with one thing, though. Let's get this right. Only his sheep can use this door and get home. See, that's a little exclusive, right? I think I know all of you in this room, but if we had a more diverse crowd, we would have just set off some furor there. A little later, we'll be in John chapter 15, and it'll say, John chapter 14, and Jesus is going to say, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And we get those same kind of conversations, right? This basically says the same thing. It says only his sheep hear his voice. Only they can enter through the door. Only they can experience the sheepfold. And eventually only they can see the ultimate sheepfold, where there's no chance of a predator, no chance of the lion ever entering again. But what is the door? He hasn't answered that question yet, so let's let Jesus do it. Verse 7. So Jesus again said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. Metaphor number one. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and he will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it, that you may have life and have it abundantly. Now that right there increases my desire for my mascot to be the sheep. When the God of the universe promises that you can have life and have it abundantly, that you can come and go and find pasture in safety, that you can be fed, that you can live life to its fullest, my radar goes up. How about yours? Sounds like sheep maybe is not so bad. Abundant life and safe pasture sounds a lot like heaven. Sounds a lot like home. Maybe you've had this experience before. Have you ever let somebody just like take care of you on a trip? They just said, hey, listen, just bring the bare necessities and I've got this. Anybody ever had that experience? Like you sit back and it's just relaxing. for some people. For others, it's like, where are we going? What are we doing? What will happen when we get there? Can I make lunch? No, maybe you didn't understand. Bring some clothes. Nothing else. I've got this. You'll never have a need. When do we get there? And of course, kids, what's their question? Are we there yet? They can't relax and enjoy the experience. Are we there yet? Say, relax, homie. Enjoy the ride. Jesus just says here, like to us, just trot around with your little geeky, no-bend knee. I got this. I am the door to all that is good, Jesus says. But these non-spirit-filled disciples had to have that explained. Jesus says, I'm the gate, I'm the door. Enter there and you are safe. You will see home. And in the middle of it, he says, don't be deceived. Satan will make things look better than home. Satan will he'll give you things that will maybe provide comfort that looks more exciting than home. But just remember this, his goal is to lure a sheep out, isolate a sheep, and kill it, and drag it into hell with him, quite honestly. And don't ever forget this. Don't ever forget that in your quiet moments, in your private time, that there are two voices. Why should you know the Word of God? Why should you be so familiar with the Bible? Why should you walk in the Spirit? So that the Spirit is the prominent voice in your head and not the voice of Satan, who cannot enter you if you're a Christian, but he can sit on your shoulder and whisper. And therefore, some of you that think you're just downright crazy because you hear multiple voices are not crazy, you're just living. You're just alive. Because he doesn't stop trying to kill the sheep. Are you with me? But those who hear the correct voice will always, listen, those who hear, not just have the voices going, but hear the correct voice and move into the sheepfold, will always have an abundant and safe life. Second metaphor. I am the good shepherd, verse 11. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. And man, I don't know who these cats are, man, but here's the simple deal. God has set shepherds, under shepherds, to help all of us. That's my role in this church, and it's some of your roles in this church. And so you need to take your role as an under shepherd very carefully, because you need to be really locked into the shepherd, or otherwise you're one of these hired hands that comes in as a dad or an elder in a church or a deacon in a church. And if you're not locked in with God, you will be this hired hand who will be distracted all the time, and Satan will come and snatch the sheep out from under you and scatter the sheep and harm the sheep. And so we're to be diligent with the shepherd so that we are not these hired hands. I had to read this to somebody recently, and it was not any fun. I said, you have worked as a hired hand both in your family and as a leader in God's church, and you have been distracted by the evil one and have not paid attention to the shepherd, and therefore there is chaos and disruption in your life because your sheep have been attacked because they didn't have an under shepherd here to point them to the shepherd. Everybody tracking with that? Don't ever make us have, or I pray that I never have to have somebody have that conversation with me. I won't even point at you, because I know I will stand before God and give an account for every one of you about whether I was pointing to the shepherd or allowing you to be distracted. But don't miss this. This passage is actually tremendous in the middle of that. He points out that we're actually hapless. See, here's the reason the gospel struggles so much in America is that we don't want to be this guy who is, or this gal who is dependent upon the great shepherd, on the good shepherd. We want to run the ship, and so but every time we run the ship, we have to run away from the flock. We have to run out from the sheepfold. We have to isolate ourselves where we are easy prey for the evil one. So but he points out that we're hapless, and like the sheep in the horse trough. I mean, remember the little sheep who was just there with his legs sticking right straight up in there? He would have starved to death if Ken had not come along, if the shepherd had not come along and snatched him out and set him back on his feet where he could go get some water and eat. There was a rescue. That word sounds familiar, doesn't it? We need rescue. One reason we need to identify ourselves as sheep is we need rescue. I love that there's so much that makes sense here. You know, our lives cry out that there are wolves around us and things after us and an evil one trying to deceive us and trying to kill us, and that there's hired hand, worthless leaders, under shepherds out there. Maybe you had a bad dad who didn't protect you, didn't point you to the shepherd. It makes sense. We see it. But there's so much promise here. We see the good shepherd say, I'm here. The protector's here. The rescuer is here. We just have to turn to him. So Jesus repeated it again. Just, you know, if the God of the universe, the creator of all who is, repeats something, he's probably pretty serious about it. So verse 14, he says, I am the good shepherd. And then just walk with me here. Look at all the knowing. You want to know why we need to get together and we need to talk about the gospel. We need to talk about the glory of Jesus. We need to look at the Bible to understand God's character. Look at all the knowing here. He says, I know my own and my own know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. He says, you sheep can have such a relationship with me that you know me like I know the Father. That is astonishing. As a matter of fact, in John 17, Jesus prays that. Father, come and make yourself so known to them that they will understand that they are with me like I am with you. That is astonishing. He's about 12 hours from death, and he is praying that we will see and know him so that we will know the Father. I love it. And he says, and I lay down my life for the sheep, as the verse continues. That's the gospel, the laying down of a life for the good of others. And he says, I have other sheep that are not of this fold. That's, by the way, all you Arnold Gentiles, that's you. If you're confused about who the others are, Jesus goes, they're not aliens, right? This is not like Alf and his buddies. This is not extraterrestrials. I see all kinds of crazy stuff written out there in blogs about this. This is the Gentiles. This is you. I have others who I'm going to bring in. And look at this, we'll be unified. I must bring them in also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. Look at all the authority of Jesus. This charge I have received from my Father. There's a book out, Killing Jesus. Nobody killed Jesus. He laid down his life. He volunteered as a loving shepherd to lay down his life. It was like this Trinity conspiracy to love you. You get that? It's like a Trinity conspiracy to love you, the sheep, the helpless, hapless sheep that need love. That's sheer gospel. Good news straight from Jesus to you. Because see, without him, the lion will drag you straight into the pits of hell. It may only be a hell here if you're a believer, but hell none the same. But it says a true shepherd gives up his life for his sheep. And the true shepherd has come. The reason we gather is to celebrate that the true shepherd historically has come. The life has been given. I want you to think about this. We're only 12 days from Good Friday. And my prayer is that we would prepare for Good Friday. You know, I'm not completely into the church calendars, but a lot of our church forefathers, the Catholics, the Lutherans, a lot of these folks have something good in mind there, that we would take some time and spend it and focus on the fact that the Good Shepherd has showed up and he has given his life. And it's okay on Good Friday to be a little solemn. Just to reflect that your Lord, your shepherd, the one who laid down his life for you, was actually dead and laid into a deep, dark, dank tomb. His body was, but his spirit was not there, we know. So let's take some time and observe some Holy Week. Slow down. God says, why are you so frantic? I have prepared this whole trip for you. I use the analogy of somebody taking you on a trip because that's really what God says. He says, I've prepared this whole trip for you. I've got food covered. I've got the whole ride covered. Will you relax and enjoy the ride with me? Because if you look at most of the things you're frantic about in your life, it's things that we just really don't trust him with. We just really don't trust him at the end of the day. We think we're strong. But God is giving us a stark reminder here today that we're actually pretty fragile. Actually hapless, he says. But the good news is that we've been invited to be strong. We've been invited into the protection of the shepherd, into the perfection by the keeper of the door, the gate, the one who's in charge. But the best news of all is that if you reflect over the next few days about Good Friday, at some point you get to celebrate because Sunday comes. He's not in a dark tomb because he lives. He rose. And my suspicion is that one of two things need to happen in this room today. If you've never received Jesus as the shepherd, as the one in charge, the one who will protect and love and care, humble yourself as a hapless sheep, then receive him. And the second thing is, if you have received him, then those areas that you are frantic about, when we take communion today, could you focus some of your prayer time on that he would do a whole lot better job of taking care of those areas than you are? And just hand them to him. That's what when you're a believer, that's what going into the door is. It's, God, I've kept this area from you. I have kept this area of my life from you. I'm coming into the door and giving it to you. I'm laying it down for you now. And the frantic goes away. And it'll crop back up because remember, you got two voices. And he'll remind you, he's not doing a very good job with that. You need to take it back over. Jesus is not going fast enough. But those are our desires. So let's leave our desires at the door and hear the voice of the shepherd. Listen to the voice of the shepherd. Receive Jesus.